National Press Club here in Washington. A number of African-American activists are speaking out against gun control laws currently being proposed. Will include a former Dallas Cowboys football player, the head of the National Black Chamber of Commerce, and a doctor from the Clayton State University Health Clinic. The Center for Urban Renewal and Education is hosting this event, and it's just getting underway.
Procedures in our nation. This morning I'm going to speak for our chairman of the board for the Center for Urban Renewal and Education, G. Kenneth Blackwell, who cannot be here this morning, but prepared a statement that I'm going to read for you now with a little help of technology. The Second Amendment is a fundamental right enshrined in that sacred list of liberties in our Constitution that we call the Bill of Rights. It is right alongside the freedom of speech, the freedom of religious faith, the right that no person can ever make you a slave, the right that no state can deprive us of our rights or equal protection of the law, and the right to vote. It is a right of self-defense. In 1791, that right was adopted as the Second Amendment, as a right of the people to band together to collectively defend themselves against public violence, meaning government tyranny. In 1868, that right was extended through the 14th Amendment to also defend against government oppression by state or local governments. And by 1791, through 1868 to 2013, it was and is also the right to defend yourself against private violence, the violence perpetrated by criminals. Yes, the framers of the Constitution wanted people to be able to hunt, and that is an essential part of our cultural fabric as a people. It is a rich part of our heritage, part of self-reliance, a way of passing down our values. It also provides precious time to spend time together for fathers and sons, and increasingly mothers and daughters. The right to bear arms is also for competition, for sporting, and is also for collectors. But as the Supreme Court recognized just 5 years ago, it was for the right of self-defense against some future government that would refuse to stand for re-election and would hold on to power by military might, and against lawlessness and heartless folks who would victimize others. That those who founded our nation made this right part of the supreme law of the land, forever trumping every president, Congress, and court that would ever hold office in the United States. That right to protect one's life and liberty is a God-given right. It is a gift from God, not a grant from government. The government does not give us this right, just as the Declaration of Independence makes clear. Government does not give us any of our inalienable rights. Instead, it is the role of government to recognize the rights God has given to each of us, to respect those rights and to secure those rights. That's what the Second Amendment does, and it is an essential right for every American citizen who is law-abiding and peaceable, regardless of skin color, geography, education, or socioeconomic status. It is easy to understand how the Second Amendment relates to the culture of a Norman Rockwell painting of a rural father with his son walking through the woods with shotguns or rifles, hunting ducks or deer. But as important as that cultural heritage is, the core rights protected by the Second Amendment to protect yourself against public and private violence is just as real for Americans of all races and ethnic groups. We thank God that we no longer are in days where we have to fear government violence, where the Second Amendment right to resist a tyrannical government would be the right of a black man in the Deep South in 1870 having to protect himself against a local lynch mob posse, regarding which the local sheriff would look the other way, or worse yet, would sometimes be led by a local sheriff's deputy. But the right against private violence is even more important for so many black Americans today. A black man or woman in his or her 20s should be safe and secure in their apartment or going to work. A black father has a right to protect his family and his home. Or too often, and this is sad because it is harming to many black children, it is a single mother. She has every right to demand that she be able to protect herself and her family. The only clear equalizer between a striving young mother or grandmother and a full-grown man breaking into her home is a firearm that she knows how to responsibly store and use. I stand with you today in the protection of our Second Amendment rights. Sincerely, Ken Blackwell, Chairman, Board of Directors, Center for Urban Renewal and Education. Thank you. Next to the podium, I'd like to introduce someone near and dear to me and all members of our organization. Many of you know who she is and how she functions in media. Ms. Star Parker, founder and president of Center for Urban Renewal and Education, otherwise known as CURE. Star.
Thank you. And thank you, Lonnie Poindexter, who is our Director of Outreach and Education for the Center for Urban Renewal and Education. We appreciate the comment from our board chairman, Ken Blackwell, and for the media to note he is also a board member of the NRA as well as a former mayor of the city of Cincinnati. This issue is very important to him as well. Greetings. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Star Parker. I'm the founder and president of CURE, the Center for Urban Renewal and Education, a conservative think tank that promotes market-based solutions to fight poverty. CURE has called this Black History Month press conference today to bring attention to the importance of defending the right of all Americans, guaranteed under the Second Amendment of our Constitution, to bear arms. Thank you for being here. We're gathered here today to provide a forum for black leaders from the world of politics and public policy in Washington, from the business community, from academia, and from the clergy to express our deep concern about efforts currently underway to limit our God-given and constitutional right of self-defense. Although CURE is based in Washington, D.C., I am a resident of California. Thus, Senator Dianne Feinstein, the author of one of the proposals to advance government control over gun ownership, is my representative. CURE is hosting this press conference with the hope that the information we share today will serve as a reminder to Ms. Feinstein and to all other United States senators that black history is rife with government demands to strip away our constitutional rights. We're standing here today because we believe that it is our duty as African American citizens to join together and challenge the gun control proposals currently being considered on Capitol Hill. 2 points. Number one, the call for universal background checks as qualifiers for constitutional rights invokes painful memories of Jim Crow laws and black codes. A substantial body of research already shows that gun controls empowers criminals and weaken law-abiding citizens. Regarding black realities, blacks are the least armed, least protected and defended, and the most assaulted citizens in our country. According to a recent Pew Research Center survey, 42% of whites and only 16% of blacks say that they have a pistol or rifle at home. Can anyone whom God has blessed with a brain actually think that universal background checks in which some past legal infraction might nullify a gun application will not result in even fewer law-abiding black men from obtaining a weapon to protect their families? And what about black women? According to research published in the British Journal of Psychiatry by Dr. Priscilla Coleman, professor of human development and family studies at Bowling Green State University, meta-analysis studies show an 81% higher risk of mental health problems with women who have had an abortion. Will abortion be one of the questions on the universal background check application? Number two, the call for banning specific guns, as Senator Feinstein has proposed, is also problematic as it puts too much power in the hands of politicians and the law enforcement establishment, which cannot always be trusted. In a Pew Research survey, in 2009, 40% of whites compared to only 24% of blacks said that they have a great deal of confidence in the local police to enforce the law. Law-abiding black citizens live under siege in crime-ridden communities. Yet somehow they are supposed to buy the logic that giving more power to those in law enforcement already charged with maintaining order but don't, while stripping away the freedoms of those who do obey the law, will somehow make us better off? One question the gun control advocates are never challenged to answer for the most vulnerable in our country when they are moving to promote gun control is, how do you take a gun from the underground, the criminal, a racist cop, or a tyrannical government? Taking arms from the law-abiding many puts too much power in the hands of a perhaps ill-intended few. Black slave and Jim Crow history should serve as a clarion call that Americans of all backgrounds must fight this current round and all attempts of gun control. This Black History Month press conference is dedicated to the tradition of Black history legend Frederick Douglass, a runaway slave and great American orator who, as Cure Advisory Board member and Stanford Law professor Marcus Cole reminded us, Douglass stated on this issue that a man's rights rest in 3 boxes: the ballot box, the jury box, and the cartridge box. Thank you.
Go, girl.
I'm very pleased that we're joined for just representatives from all across this country who've come here at their own expense, many of them, to share their thoughts with us today. What we have before you is an opportunity for 4 to 5 of them to make a presentation here. We're pleased that media has come. We'll be available to answer your questions after these presentations. I will call on them. We'll have media ask questions. We will then do an informal dismiss, and then you can talk to the rest that have gathered. We then will take a small break. We will go for lunch, and we will come back and do a roundtable discussion on this extremely important issue, but that particular meeting is closed to the press. First, joining us is Dr. Ken Hutcherson. Dr. Hutcherson is a former American football linebacker in the NFL for the Dallas Cowboys, who is now a pastor of Antioch Baptist Church in the great state of Washington. Doctor.
Thanks so much, Star. It is a privilege to be here today. And I'm going to tell you how important it is to me to be here. I've had cancer for 12 years. I've had bone cancer for 4.5 years. Now, if anyone has ever dealt with anyone with bone cancer, know anything about cancer, that is a very difficult time, and the pain oftentimes is unbearable. But I came from Seattle to be here because this issue is a lot more important than my health. It is a lot more important than my church. Is a lot more important than just myself. Now, I think it's important that I was shocked last night that I may have to change my mind about something. And that was when I heard that several African-American Pro Bowl NFL greats came out and said that we should really work on changing the Second Amendment. They are supporting the president's ways of going after the Second Amendment. So what I have to change my mind is that I think it's probably true there was brain damage in the NFL. I'm going to tell you how important the Constitution is, and that we should be very careful about changing anything, especially the Second Amendment. All of you in here understand the importance of light. Light gives us ways that we can step correctly. The Constitution to the United States is the light that allows us to walk consistently and constantly. Now, you may not appreciate that example unless you understand the importance of light. Do you understand that the first thing God created in Genesis chapter 1, verse 3 was light? Light. And God spoke to it directly, and light obeyed at 186,000 miles per second. Now, if God created it in Genesis 1:3, and light started at 183,000 miles per second, to this very day, and I believe in a young earth. Now, you can say whatever you want. You can believe in the millions of years. I believe in a God who can create immediately. Amen. And I think the earth is a young earth, 7,000 to 8,000 years at the most. Now, Genesis 1:3 tells me light started traveling in Genesis 1:3 over 7,000 years ago. And it's still traveling at 186,000 miles to be obedient to God. And as pastors, as leaders, we need to be obedient to God. And God says, protect that which he has given the United States through men who believed in his word. Now, that's not impressive. What's impressive is what light reveals. If we turn this light off, one thing is for sure, all of us up here would disappear. Because you cannot see, you cannot walk directly, you cannot walk straight, you cannot walk in the circumstance of what is true. Light travels at 186,000 miles per second. If you multiply it times 60, light travels 11,160,000 miles in 1 minute. Multiply that times 60, light travels in 1 hour, 669,600,000 miles, and has been doing it ever since Genesis 1:3 for obedience. Why, if we are not wanting light to change, to put light on this situation, why would we ever think about changing the Constitution? Why would he ever think about touching the Second Amendment? Because it is proven true. It is proven the way for America, for African Americans especially, to protect themselves and to stand. Light traveling at 669,600,000 miles an hour. If you want to do it in a day, would you like to do it in a day? You multiply 669 million times 24. Light travels in 1 hour. Hold on. 16 billion, 70 million, 400,000 miles in 1 hour. Doing it since Genesis 1:3. Has not slowed down, has not found any excuse. I have never heard light say, well, I better not travel this fast because people are not going to understand it. Times change. And they're going to think I'm dealing with me and I'm bragging about myself. I never heard light say that. And as pastors and as Christians, as African Americans, we're not going to change our thoughts on what is right and what is needed to be done.
Amen.
Well, now see, now that's 16 billion, 70 million, 400,000, I said, in a day. It's easy to get how far light travels in a year. Would you like that? You multiply 16 billion, 70 million, 400,000 times 365. Now, you got to put your mind together to multiply that number. Okay. Light travels in 1 year. 5 trillion, 865 billion, 696 million miles. And I know a lot of you whites out there saying, hey, there ain't nowhere in the world a black man can figure that out, and we're going to check his numbers when we get out of here. Guaranteed that it does. It is so important for all of us to understand that light has been traveling 5 trillion, 865 billion, 696 million miles since Genesis 1:3, being obedient to God. We haven't been here any amount of time as long as light has. But we do know what light reveals. And this is what I have questions for all you that is listening. How long? How many children has to die before we come to the conclusion that the issue about the Second Amendment is not about protecting kids, it's about changing the Constitution? How many children got to die before we admit that? How many children has to die before we come to common sense? Which we have lost much in America today. It's not much common sense left. But how many of us are going to allow children to continue to die, to put signs in front of our schools to invite people to come in and kill them? What are you talking about, Pastor? Let me tell you what I'm talking about. How many of you would put in front of your house a sign that says gun-free zone? How many of you would put in front of your house, I have diamonds, I have gold, I have silver, I have precious metals, I have some great expensive artifacts, and I am not home. My dogs that are guard dogs are locked up, and I won't be home until 3:30 tomorrow afternoon. Would you put that sign in front of your house? But yet and still we want to put gun-free zones in front of our schools. How many black children has to die before you even care? Why isn't all the children that have been destroyed in all of our cities, black on black crime, don't get any front page news, but you get a Sandy Hook? And what happens? Everybody's in an uproar. We've had 10 times more African American children killed with guns. Because you know what? How many children have to die, black and white, for us to come to the conclusion that most of the gun violence is in cities with the most gun control? When are we going to change our minds and put some common sense in there? When are we going to come to the conclusion that privacy may not be as important as a life? We need to know how many children is going to die before we change the HIPAA laws. How many children have to die before we get these lunatics, half of them, and people with mental issues off the streets? But because of their privacy, we can't do anything about it. And oftentimes families struggle to get them institutionalized. So how many children, and last of all, how many children has to die, my friends, before we come to the realization that a bad man with a gun can only be stopped by a good man with a gun? Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you, my pastor. I am so pleased that you traveled so far to be here with us today. We have people from all over the country who have traveled. But next we have a local here in Washington, D.C., Mr. Harry C. Alford. He's the co-founder and president and CEO of the National Black Chamber of Commerce. But he represents people all across this country because his chamber represents 2 million black businesses in the United States. Harry Alford is going to talk on this particular issue today, gun control, but they handle a variety of issues. He is not a stranger in the halls of Congress and even consulting sometimes with the White House. Harry Alford.
Thank you, Star. Good morning. As Star said, I'm Harry Alford. I represent 2.1 million black-owned businesses in the United States. We have 140 chapters in the United States and 95 chapters elsewhere, Africa, Europe, South America, the Caribbean. Our business owners, many of them have retail stores, they have restaurants, they have cash operations. One of our previous board chair has a concrete plant in New Orleans. After Katrina wiped out everybody, streets, curbs, driveways, his business was booming. But he had to have Brinks trucks come to his company twice a day, and he had 2 of his employees armed to the teeth, because he was not going to let his business go down because of some bad guys. I want to thank the Lord for our Constitution. I also want to thank the NRA for its legacy. The National Rifle Association was founded by religious leaders who wanted to protect free slaves from the Ku Klux Klan. They would raise money, buy arms, show the free slaves how to use those arms, and protect their families. God bless you. Many of us probably wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the NRA. Rodney King showed an interesting model. When the riots started in L.A. and they started wiping out neighborhoods, mostly in South Central, when the rioters got to Koreatown, the violence stopped. Because every male Korean associated with those stores stood outside, they drew a line and held their weapons. Come across that line, you're dropping. And they meant it. Okay, let's go back to South Central, because people there don't have guns to protect themselves. It is a right just to live in Southern California, where I'm from. You've got diamond head, copperhead rattlers, you've got scorpions, you've got coyotes, you have mountain lions. One of my neighbors lost his German Shepherd to a mountain lion that came into his backyard. The German Shepherd put up a fight. All he could do was watch, because he didn't have a gun. Just a fire in the air to scare the mountain lion. And the shepherd went off with the mountain lion. What if you're living in Florida and a python snake's in your yard between you and your infant child, or between you and your pet? What are you going to do? I think God gives you the right, and the Constitution does, to protect that child or that animal or your house. My people are from Louisiana. You're fishing, water moccasins, alligators. They show up. They don't knock on the door. You got to deal with it. You don't walk outside. If you're a farmer, you have to deal with these varmints. So it's part of our lives. But what's going on here, I think, politically, in this town, is a mind game. This is a diversion to keep you off the thought of this poor economy, which generates crime. This is about crime, and it's trying to divert your attention away from it, because they can't create jobs. I've got 2 quotes from people who know what they're talking about. Bruce Weinberg, PhD, Ohio State University. Public officials can put more cops on the beat, pass tougher sentencing laws, and take other steps to reduce crime. But there are limits to how much these can do. We found that a bad labor market has a profound impact on the crime rates. The review of economics and statistics, as wages go down and unemployment goes up, crime goes up, driving businesses and residents out of the community. This in turn causes more unemployment, which causes more crime, a spiral dive situation from which it is difficult to recover. My friends, what we need to do is create jobs, create businesses. Small businesses hire 70% of all the new jobs. They create a thriving economy, less crime. But by all means, and let me deviate from Psalms, Pastor, though I walk through the valley of the death, I fear no evil, because I am the meanest, nastiest, fiercest person walking in that valley.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And in particular, a reminder of the Los Angeles riots. I was actually there during that time as well, and you're absolutely right that that is when we saw most of the violence stop, is when they reached Koreatown. I vividly saw at my Baskin-Robbins that Korean on his roof with his shotgun. Reverend Kenneth Blanchard will be our next presenter. He's a United States Marine Corps veteran and pastor of a Baptist congregation here in Washington, D.C. He has been a gun rights activist since 1991. Blanchard was one of the first African-American firearms instructors in the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency. Reverend Ken, thank you for joining us.
Good morning, everybody. In honor of Black History, I want to introduce you to two people you might not know. One is my grandmother, and the other is my mother. Mary, both named Mary. Mary from Tidewater, Virginia, was my first instructor in firearms. My grandmother had a loaded shotgun next to her wood-burning stove all my life. It was unlocked. It was secured only by, we knew about Grandma. If we wanted to mess with that shotgun, we had to go through her. The shotgun did a couple of things. It secured the children, 30 of us, who we went there for refuge. My grandmother was the place where you'd go when your family wasn't doing too well, or summer vacation. It wasn't much to the house. It was the love that was in it. Grandma taught us a lot. She was the mother of her church. She prepared communion on Sunday. She was that mother. But she also had that shotgun. And I remember once when there was a strange pickup truck early in the morning that showed up at the house, and all the kids say, "Grandma, there's a couple of white guys coming out of the pickup truck." And Grandma grabs the shotgun. She moves to the screen door, and she says, "Good morning." They said, "Good morning, Miss Mary. We just passed into your land, and we wanted to make sure that we gave you some deer on our way back. And is that okay?" And I watched these men who I didn't know respect this little old lady from the rural parts of Tidewater, who also, I could see in their eyes, they saw when she moved to the right that she had something in her hand. And I thought, that made a difference in my life, that you can talk the talk, but you're going to have to walk the walk sometimes. And I learned as a Marine that sometimes you don't have to fire a shot, you just have to carry yourself the right way. And I learned that lesson when I got into the city, and my mother said, we were country at one time, but now we got to kind of work in the system, and we don't hunt here in the city, and they talk about guns. And I had to remind my mother, we got the same mom. Remember the shotgun? And she said, "Oh, yeah." So later in life, when I became a firearms instructor and I became a protector, it was not by my own doing. I just kind of kept getting in that same mode over and over again. I've been everything from a safety guard, a safety patrol, a lifeguard. If it had a guard on the back of it, I've done it, bodyguard. And then the ultimate is one time I actually stood outside the bedroom of President Reagan. I protected families. I've been the guy who's carried a gun most of his life. And then when I got into clergy, they said, "You know what? You're really different from us." I said, "No, I'm not. I'm just a shepherd." A shepherd would defend his flock. A shepherd would go into harm's way. And then I became the shepherd of hunters and the shepherd of fishermen and the shepherd of those who usually don't come to church. I'm a big evangelist. I will go to where the people are. And they said, "I'm glad you're here. Help us understand how the world's making us seem like bad guys." I said, "As the hunter, you have a special spot in the world. You're conserving things. You're making the whole ecosystem work. But if you look at the news, we're the bad guys." I said, "Only because they don't know, or only because they're using the lack of responsibility and the lies. And also, the biggest thing is the false gods. We have a responsibility problem. Nobody wants to take responsibility for anything. And we want to make somebody else our God, which is the ultimate sin. When a politician steps forward and says, I can save your children, you cannot save my child. When somebody believes that that person has the right to do anything, they're stepping out of bounds. I'm honored to be here as yet another shepherd to say, trust in the only true God. He is the provider of your safety. He who taught David, who trains his hands for war. For there's a time and a place for everything. And we have to make sure that we don't give too much power to those who really have none. Politicians are not the gods. Take them off the pedestal. Take them out of the positions that we have put them in. They can't fix your family. You have to fix your family. You have to take care of your child. You have to take care of your wife, your husband. It's your responsibility. What God gives you, you are a steward of. And sometimes you're going to have to go in harm's way. That's right. And you can't do it with just harsh words and empty promises. Thank you.
Our next presenter is from the great gun-free state of New York, Niger Ennis. He's joining us as the president of CORE, the Congress for Racial Equality, and it's one of the oldest civil rights organizations in the country. Niger, thank you.
Thank you, Star. Thank you, Star, and thank you, Cure, for putting this important press conference together today. I'm not going to be nearly as eloquent as the speakers that came before me, and a lot has been asserted here, but let me just briefly say that gun control, for Black Americans, we know that gun control has ultimately been about people control. It sprouts from racist soil, be it after or during the infamous Dred Scott case, where Black man's humanity was not recognized. And the beauty about some racists is that sometimes they're blatantly honest. And the racist Chief Justice, Taney, said, we cannot allow the law to recognize the humanity of this individual because he would be able to keep and bear arms. When a lot of Democratic-controlled segregationist governments after the Civil War attempted to deny Black men and women their freedom, they instituted black codes, largely to deny the Second Amendment from newly freed slaves. And so today in our urban centers, innocent Black folk may not be the victims of the Klan or of white racism, but we are the victims of merciless criminals that are armed and don't give a darn about gun control laws. How dare you talk about taking away a constitutional right? The Second Amendment is not about guns. It's about freedom. It's about liberty. And it's about full humanity of decent people. You know, many of us gun rights advocates, my father, Roy Ennis, chairman of the Congress for Racial Equality, serves on the board of the NRA, and I want to thank Harry Alford for his powerful words about the NRA and the history, the right history of the NRA, which was established not only by religious leaders, but by former Union soldiers that were disturbed that Southerners could shoot straighter and better than Northerners in the Union Army. But the reality is that for me, it's a little bit more than just about the philosophies around the Second Amendment. It's very personal. You see, I lost two brothers to violence, one in 1968, one in 1982. They were murdered by criminals who didn't pay attention to gun laws. And they were murdered in communities, the South Bronx and in Harlem, in cities that had the strictest gun control laws. I ask myself always, what if decent people in that communities where my brothers were killed had had the opportunity to step in, to confront that bad guy, that bad criminal with a gun, with a good person with a gun? They might be alive today. Thank you again, Star, and thank you all for this important support for freedom and for liberty.
Our next presenter is from the great state of Georgia, Dr. Deborah Honeycutt, and she is a board certified family medicine physician and a medical director of Clayton State University Health Clinic in Atlanta. In addition, Dr. Honeycutt currently serves as the Georgia State Delegate to the American Academy of Family Physicians Commission on Education. I really appreciate my dear friend joining us at this very important press conference. Dr. Honeycutt.
Thank you, Star. Well, I am, yes, from the great state of Georgia, but I was born in Chicago, Illinois. And now I live just a stone's throw from Kennesaw, Georgia. Chicago, Illinois, one of the strictest gun law areas in our country. Murder rate, out the wahoo. Kennesaw, Georgia, where every able-bodied head of household is mandated by law to have a firearm for protection of their families. Very low. I think in the last 20 years there have been 3 murders in Kennesaw, Georgia. But I speak to you from the standpoint of a physician today. The Second Amendment to our Constitution of the United States, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, as a physician, when considering a patient's problem, I take seriously my pledge to first do no harm. Anyone who needs a doctor, like you, Pastor, they want to be cared for by a doctor who takes seriously that pledge. First, do no harm. Those who serve in our United States government take a pledge to uphold the Constitution of these United States. That's right. Despite the Center for Disease Control reports that in 2010, firearms were used to take the lives of almost 32,000, that's 32,000 Americans, via homicide, suicide, and unintentional shootings. And despite some recently highly publicized, yet tragic murders committed with firearms, constitutionally protected rights must remain. Now, obesity is a serious problem in America, increasing in prevalence, affecting millions, and causing 300,000 deaths a year. 300,000 deaths a year in our country. Now, President Obama has voiced his concern regarding obesity, noting initiatives such as Let's Move and the My Plate guidelines as some solutions to the problem. Solutions aimed at motivating people and supplying them with knowledge and opportunities to make the best choices for their health. Now, we would not think of enacting regulations that outlaw eating or outlaw eating certain foods or that dictate how much food a person can eat just because some people are obese in this country. Banning guns or infringing the gun rights of citizens does not and will not keep criminals or those intent on harming others from acquiring and using guns. The persons who want to infringe upon our constitutional right to keep and bear arms must be made to understand that they are not keeping their pledge to uphold our Constitution. So I ask our president, and the Congress, first, do no harm. Do no harm to the citizens of the United States of America. Uphold your pledge, just like I, as a physician, uphold my pledge. Uphold the Constitution of the United States. Don't infringe upon the constitutional rights to keep and bear arms. Uphold that constitutional right. First, do us no harm. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Our next presenter is Reverend William Owens, Jr., who is the founder of God, Guns, and the Constitution. And CURE works closely with his coalition of African American pastors, and we will be hosting regional town halls in black communities across the country with CAP on this very important issue. William Owens.
Thank you, Star. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to give honor to God and his son, Jesus Christ, who is my Lord and Savior. Honor to those who spoke before me with much respect. Also honor to my wife of 27 years and my 4 adult children, 4 and no more. And they're all out the door. I am founder of Warriors Arise Ministries, Spiritual Life, Spiritual Maturity, and Spiritual Warfare. And we are engaged in a great spiritual conflict in our nation. The current trajectory in which the Obama administration is leading our country is evident through policy that is being executed sometimes with executive orders. It should cause every leader, especially that of the clergy, within both the white and black community, to arise and speak truth to power. To forsake this highest call is to surrender our families and our faith. We have no option but to draw the line in the sand and stand against this and any arrogant effort to tamper with our constitutional right to bear arms. On February 2nd of this year, I, along with other leaders, including Gun Owners of America, stood in front of the Capitol building and held a press conference on this very issue. And the issue, and I want to somewhat borrow from the fact that the pastor talked about light, and the light gets its origin and gets its power from the truth. In John 8:32, it says, "And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." I want to at least take a look from a historic perspective on this issue, because history will testify of what's to come. The truth of God's hand was upon Christopher Columbus in such a way that he declared these words: "The working out of all things was entrusted by our Lord to each person. But it happens in conformity with his sovereign will, even though he gives advice to many. I've found our Lord well disposed toward my heart's desire, and he gave me the spirit of intelligence for the task. Who doubts this illumination was from the Holy Spirit? He, the Spirit, with marvelous rays of light, consoled me through the holy and sacred scriptures, a strong and clear testimony, encouraging me to proceed. And continually, without ceasing for a moment, they inflame me with a sense of great urgency. If it were not for God upon the heart of this man and upon those who came to this country for religious liberties, we would not be standing here today." The truth is, it was the guns or muskets and swords of the black-robed regiment that fought off the efforts of the British to take away their armor. And that name was given to them by the British, the black-robed regiment. The truth is, it's both God holding our hands and our guns and the other that made the Constitution even possible. So there you have it, God, guns, and the Constitution. You can't have one without the other. And it is this same Constitution that will ensure we keep tyranny at bay. Anyone who claims Christianity, and not everyone does, and not everyone should, please tell the American people why we should, and why some do, deny the history of God and therefore the historic context of guns in our nation. Should we be silent to a political agenda that is contrary to the truth that God, guns, and the Constitution work together in order to enable us what we enjoy today? This current administration is far from the truth. This agenda is becoming more and more obvious to all, that it's a distraction. It's a reason, it's an excuse to carry out an ideology that is more evident every day and every week that goes by, that it is anti-American. And when you touch the Second Amendment, you can't become more anti-American, because America would not be without her guns, and guns would not be necessary without her God. We call upon Americans, both black, white, Hispanics, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, and even those who are not of our faith, to agree upon this. Without God, without guns, and without the Constitution, America's end will come with haste. For when they change our Constitution, they will take our guns. And when they take our guns, they will also seek to take our God. That's when Americans will fight back. We fought with the help of God for our God-given freedoms, so it should not come as a surprise that Americans will fight when their freedoms are threatened. It's in our DNA. What man would not fight to protect his wife? What mother would not fight to protect her child? And what nation will not fight to protect its very existence? I say to those who claim the Christian faith, including our president and any politician, your claim of Christianity demands you to speak to these issues as Christ would, even as my claim of Christianity demands me to speak truth to power. We are doing these town hall meetings, God, Guns, and the Constitution. Our next one is in Dallas, March 9th. We are determined to bring pastors, leaders, Republicans, Democrats, Independents together and discuss these issues. People are coming out because people are concerned. I want to once again thank Star Parker and Cure for putting this on, because Americans will not be silent. Our Second Amendment is ours to keep, and we must defend it and ensure that no power, by executive order or not, takes it away. Thank you very much.
Our final speaker of this session, before we open to questions from the media, will be Pastor Bruce E. Rivers, a very dear friend of mine from the great state and gun-free state of California. Bruce is the father of a child who was murdered by gang members, and he wanted to put a face on what urban centers are dealing with, in particular to this issue. Bruce.
And the church said amen. I'm not a politician. I'm just a preacher. And you invite me to the party, you got to let me dance the way I dance. I want to thank God for this opportunity to stand up for freedom. I want to thank my friend Star Parker for the Cure Pastors Network, of which I'm one of the original members, amen?
That's right.
I want to echo the words of Mr. Frederick Douglass, which we heard a little earlier. A man's rights rest in 3 boxes: the ballot box, the jury box, and the cartridge box. Upon hearing from the God-appointed speakers that have already talked before me, I am humbled today as I reflect on an event which this December 2013 will have eclipsed 20 years of my life. I grew up on the beautiful Monterey Peninsula, the adopted son of a Navy veteran father and a civil service mother. Went to college, graduated, traveled, finally settled down with a ready-made family. God blessed me with a great lady, 2 sons and a daughter. Oh, happy day. Time passes, seasons change, people grow up. Boys become men, girls become women, and the community I walked and talked and played in changed. Seaside, California was a great Mecca situation where large African-American population between San Francisco and Los Angeles, and we had a wonderful time growing up there in the 60s and 70s. Fast forward to 1993, because I don't want to keep it too long, after a family trip from Thanksgiving, life turned upside down. My son was gunned down right in front of my house by men who had criminal records and automatic weapons. One of the guns was found on the day of my son's funeral as the police chased one of the alleged shooters through his home. And due to our total disregard for God's foundational truth, nothing was done. No arrests were made until close to 20 years later. You get home and read Genesis 4 when you get a chance. The Word of God teaches us about the first murder. Cain's sacrifice was unacceptable, and then he got angry with God as God insisted that he do the right thing. In other words, Cain got a little ticked off because he couldn't do his own thing. Cain decided to kill his brother rather than get right with God. Sounds like our country. There were no guns available then, although there may have been a knife or maybe a rock or a farming tool. The Bible does not say whether Cain had a knife or a gun or a rock. The point is, the evil in Cain's heart was the cause of the murder, not the availability of the murder weapon. God did not ban rocks or knives or farming tools then, but he did banish the murderer. And if you look in Genesis 9 and 6, you will see God has instituted capital punishment. Well, whoever sheds blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. But he said nothing about banning weapons. Let me be clear right here. There's no such thing as an assault weapon. These are just high caliber guns, amen? The AR in the AR-15 doesn't stand for assault rifle. It stands for the company that made it, the Armor Light Company, who later sold it to Colt, amen? A little history for you. You need to get this stuff right when you put it out there, amen? It stands for the Armor Light Rifle. Listen to me. I have since asked myself this question. Would the proposed regulations that I've been reading on the table today have saved my child from being gunned down? The answer is no. Due to the fact that the criminals who had the guns did not obey the law. And I believe they won't obey the next law. The guns they had were illegal. I just told you they found one of them as a suspect ran through his house. One of the very guns. The killing went on for close to 3 years in our community. We lost 9 children in Seaside, California on the beautiful Monterey Bay. Children who the summer before were all in my living room playing Nintendo and Mario Brothers. God, I hate that song. Has forgiveness come? Yes. What stopped the killing? Not the law, not the police. You do realize the police are peace officers, not really protectors. But it was prayer. We went out on the street corner and stood 72 hours on the anniversary of my son's death. 3 days, standing in a corner with a coat and a chair and prayed. And this killing stopped. I've since learned there's a systematic plan to force me and all of you to live apart from our God by agreeing with everything which is contrary to his standard. God, when he dealt with Cain, did not register rocks or put a background check on those with their farming equipment or whatever it was that Cain used to kill his brother. Instead, God dealt with the criminal. All the way back to Noah, the penalty for murder has been death. I do remember going with my Uncle Lee and my Mr. West hunting at Big Sur, chasing them pigs and them rabbits and them ducks. I remember my father taking me to the gun range to learn proper understanding of guns and responsible ownership. But I also learned I did have a right to bear arms for protection of my family. I wasn't home that night. But I heard the 35 gunshots. Rat-tat-tat-tat-tat, rat-tat-tat-tat-tat. I learned then I am the first line of defense in my house. Not just the police, and certainly not this government. The Word of God, in my humble opinion, and upon which I stand, is good enough for me, especially when I read Nehemiah. Those who built on the wall and those who carried burdens loaded themselves so that with one hand they worked as construction, and with the other hand they held a weapon. Every one of the builders had a sword girded at his side as he built. Thank you, Cure, as we begin to rebuild the freedom in this country. I have learned how to say enough. I've learned how to say I shall not be moved. I've learned how to say no new rules until you learn to enforce the ones we already have. In the name of Jesus, I pray.
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor. Oh, yeah. We love the passion of our pastors. It's one of the reasons that CURE has developed its pastor network all across the country, and it's one reason that we have hired Mr. Lonnie Poindexter, my friend for 25 years, to move from California to head up this great work. I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Poindexter to engage the media on any questions they might have at this time. Thank you. Marina? She's asking a question that I don't know the answer.
I just wanted to comment before the questions that what we're attempting to, and I think we achieve this, is to give you a cross-section of Black America as it's truly represented, God-fearing people who have a strong love for our Constitution. We love our country, we love our government, we love our Constitution, and we love our freedom that gives us the right to be the first defender and first line of defense in seeing to the protection of our family and those that we love and that are close and endear to us. So we'll open up to brief questions now.
Hi, I'm Penny with CNS News. Could you, whoever wants to answer, expand on the connection between Jim Crow law and the background check, please?
I'll jump in. The very first gun laws in America actually started in Virginia when we were still colonies. And from 1640, there's been a long time history of rules against who has the guns. The very first gun law was against Native Americans, the African, and Chinese servants. It's gone every 30 years since then. And in the 1800s, especially after the Civil War, there was the institution of the black codes. Once you find out who has the guns, you can take the guns. And it was instituted as almost a habitual thing for the African community that you don't want to keep your son or daughter out of work camp, out of jail, out of beginning lynch, because see, the rules were so heinous that if you had even a musket ball or even a dog in your property, you could be pulled out by anybody, any citizen. So the rules continued that way so bad that grandmothers and mothers would say, I don't want my boys playing with guns. It wasn't because of the Second Amendment. It wasn't because of the right to keep them bearing. It was just to keep them alive. When you had everything going against you, and when we moved, we migrated from the rural South into the cities, it got even worse because we lost space. We were crammed together. All the laws were put exactly where the black people were. So Chicago and Detroit, the same place where we migrated from, also became the strictest places because they wanted to keep us in check, keep us in line, and that has been a steady stream and never stopped. So when you say registration, it hits a button for me.
If you have questions, see Marina, and there she is. Any other questions?
Could we have you come up to the mic so everybody can hear your question? Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for having this great press conference. Awareness in the American public is sorely needed. I'd like to know if you have a response to the Colorado legislator and others who told women that if they fear that they may be raped, they should use ballpoint pens or bodily fluids because they may shoot somebody by mistake if they were given guns. Oh, by the way, those legislators were Democrats.
It seems often to be the Democrats that want to take away the Second Amendment from American citizens. Actually, it's the Democrats, the same party that enslaved and also instituted most of the Jim Crow laws that we saw, where part of it, as you just heard, was to take away the right to bear arms. On the question of women and arms, you know, there's this insistence that people cannot be trained to shoot a gun, and so therefore women should take a second place in our society and wait for the police. We've had records of testimony that this is not a good idea because often, and in particular in black communities, it takes the police a little bit more time to get there. So it is important that women learn how to secure an arm, use an arm, and protect their Second Amendment right to bear arms. Yes, please. Absolutely.
And I did not know that I would be standing up here today, but on that comment about women, my name is Vera Sadler. I am the husband of Pastor Donald Sadler. The wife. Oh, sorry. I'm the wife of Pastor Donald Sadler. Vera, could we? And we're from New York City, who just passed that heinous law about not bearing arms. And I am a gun owner. I own 2 legally registered pistols. But if I was attacked and possibly raped, and I'm not sure anybody watch our news, and women are being assaulted every day, but I would not want to try to defend myself against a rapist with some bodily fluids. We pastor churches in the city of Newburgh, which has the highest crime rate right now. I work with ex-offenders every day. Most of the ex-offenders, and I've worked with ex-offenders, the formerly incarcerated and incarcerated, for over 25 years. Most of the individuals I work with some of them have gun charges. Not one of those criminals that I work with or ex-offenders, their gun charges have never been that they legally own these pistols. Can we get this right in the media? Congress, they have never been where those guns they owned were because they legally went and possess those, okay? Now, if I had an attacker come against me, I don't think any of those men who will corner me, I would say, I have a pen, and this is going to stop you, or I'm going to pee my pants, and this is going to stop you from raping me. I'm going to pull out my .38 that I legally own, and I'm going to aim for center mass or whatever, and I'm going to shoot them, and that's going to stop him from assaulting me. And I think when I go home that evening, my husband is going to be comfortable that I did that. My husband takes me to the range, and we go to, there's a couple of ranges where we live, and that makes him comfortable that I am trained to use those firearms.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Okay.
My name is Zena Hackworth, and I live in St. Louis, Missouri, and I am a gun owner, and I go to the range on a regular basis. I have a membership at our range, a yearly membership. My 16-year-old daughter has a membership, and she goes and she shoots. My 14-year-old daughter has a membership. She goes and she shoots. Our 11-year-old daughter has a membership, and she goes and shoots. And lastly, our 8-year-old daughter has a membership at the range, and she goes and she knows how to shoot. So I believe that every mother out there, if you care about your daughter, don't depend on the government or the police officers or law enforcement, anyone else to protect your children. There are classes. I am also an NRA member. I'm a card-carrying member of the NRA. And I will tell you that it is important for women to ignore what everyone else is saying. Think about your own protection. Think about your children's protection. You make sure that you know how to use a firearm just like I do and my 8-year-old. You make sure that you know how to shoot and aim and do it well, because all of my daughters do. And we're not going to call 911. You know, if somebody comes up to me, they're going to meet my Glock 19. So, and because I'm a CCW in my state, and that's what I carry, is a Glock 19, and it holds 15 rounds. So, and I also carry extra magazines, just so that you know. But there are classes that are available out there, just like you would not hand your keys over to a 16-year-old and say, go ahead and take the car. The first thing you do is you make sure that child knows how to handle a car, they know how to drive, and they know what to do. They take classes and they learn. That's what we do with our children. We need to teach them about gun safety, especially our girls. As a mother, I'm going to say especially my girls, they're going to know how to handle a gun before they know how to handle a car.
As a physician, I too am a legal gun owner. As a physician, I continually hear in my head, first do no harm. But I also know that means first do no harm to me. Yes. And anyone that approaches me, I want them to know that I do have a concealed carry permit. Don't let the pink handle on my pistol fool you. I can shoot center mass with the best of them.
Any other questions?
Matt, could you come up here?
You mentioned it, but you didn't really explain it. Can you explain what you seem to be saying is that gun control has racist origins. Could somebody elaborate on that? Because you just gave a few sentences about it and then just assumed everybody understood what you were talking about. Star, perhaps?
We know that gun control laws have racist origins, and we have someone who's done an in-depth look at that, and I'd like for Stacy to come and share some of the things that you know about this history of gun control.
Thank you, Star. My name is Stacy Swimp. I'm the president of the Frederick Douglass Society. And to answer your question, I think many of the speakers have actually broached that subject. I think one speaker talked about how the first gun laws were put into place to register black folks to make sure that they would know who we were, that we could not defend ourselves. I think if you look at right after the Emancipation Proclamation, what was going on down in the southern states, it's very clear that the Dixiecrats wanted to disarm black people to keep us from defending ourselves against the Klansmen who were murdering white and black Republicans to control the ballot box. So I think history is ripe with examples of there's a correlation, direct correlation between gun control and black people control. And let me just say this, and I'll be very brief. You see, I wasn't always this conservative. I grew up in a home of liberals. I grew up in a community of liberals. And once upon a time, I used to do some things that some people would call criminal in my youth. You know, the Bible says that when I was a child, I spoke as a child, I thought as a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. But I'm telling you something. I grew up in the streets, and I want you to know from firsthand experience that the homes that criminals look for to commit crimes are the ones that they assume or they believe or they know there is not a gun owner in the home. You see, there was a man across the street from me, Mr. George Jeter. Now, most black folks would tell you, when I grew up, if the homeowner had a gun, you see, they would tell you that if you tried to come in their house, they would kill you, drag you outside, and then call the police. Okay? But the truth is, everybody in my neighborhood knew you didn't go to the man across the street, Mr. Jeter, or my father, Mr. Swimp, because they had guns. Okay? And those of us that were young and stupid at that time, we knew to leave our community to do something like that. So if you think for 1 minute that gun control was going to do anything about reducing crime, what you've done is you just played into the hands of criminals. And they're having a party and thanking the Democrat Party for making it much easier for them to take the lives of law-abiding citizens. God bless you, and God bless America.
Any other questions? Yes. Meredith? And this will be the last question.
My name is Dr. Barsoom. I'm the emergency and trauma doctor. I spent 5 years in Brooklyn, New York, Kings County Hospital. I don't know if you're familiar with that. We used to get gunshots, average 2 to 3 a day. At least one dies. And That was our daily life. We got used to it. 1 to 2 person dies a day from gunshots. And when the shooting happened in the school, I saw the media, they are like, everybody was talking about it. And I kept asking myself why they are not talking about the daily killing in this community. Why? Is there any reason for that? And most of the killing, if not all of the killing, was illegal guns, gang-related. So that's my question. Why the media is not paying attention to 25 to 35 people who dies daily from gunshots and just pay attention to this?
Okay. Harry, would you like to address that?
Yes, about the diversion, because you had said that they were diversion.
Yeah, it's a diversion. What it is, they can't figure out the economy. They can't create jobs. You got these youngsters. My twin boys are college educated. They had to start their own business. Their cohorts can't find work coming out of University of Maryland, Johns Hopkins and such. So as opposed to putting on their thinking caps or thinking business-like and creating jobs, the cities are boiling over with shooting. Now, it's ironic that New York and Chicago have the highest homicide rates. Indianapolis, my wife's hometown, we lived there 10 years. Everybody in Indianapolis has a gun, and about 20% of them show their pistol on their hip. They walk around. They come in the grocery store, pistols on the hip. You get a murder in Indianapolis, it's front page news. But what happened? We had 2 murders last week. Everybody's got a gun. People mind their own business, don't mess with people.
We're not ignoring some of the challenges that are confronting African American communities. And in fact, if you look at the hands of liberals, you'll see a lot of guilt there and blood there for their bleeding heart approaches to black plight in this country. And after engineering the Great Society and war on poverty, we begin to see the collapse of the black family. It's underappreciated that during the 60s, when they started the social engineering, that 70% of black men were raised in, black children were raised in marital households, so therefore we did not see the escalated crime rates that we're seeing today. Today, 7 out of 10 black children are raised in single households. So there are other challenges confronting this particular community. But on the issue of gun control, most of the black communities that are having the most violent acts of crime are gun control areas, as was mentioned earlier. We as an organization, CURE, address some of these other problems that are confronting black people. We don't want to neglect the importance of them, but when it comes to protecting the constitutional right of an individual American to bear arms, we want to make no mistake to say that other issues are being ignored and this one has taken precedence. We want to make no mistake that this one is the protection of our First Amendment rights and therefore needs this consideration. When you talk about black unemployment, which is what one of the questions alluded to and why we're seeing such violence in some of our most hardest hit communities today, much of black unemployment today is directly at the hands of Nancy Pelosi, who when she had the gavel in the Congress, she increased minimum wage laws, or minimum wage. When you increase minimum wage, you increase black unemployment. And when you increase black youth unemployment, you increase black crime.
Okay, if there are no more questions, I want to thank everyone for coming out this morning to attend our press conference. We're officially adjourning now, and we thank you, each and every one of you.
If any of the media have any questions on who is speaking, please see me afterwards, Mary
Yeah.
Congress is at the end of its week-long President's Day break. The Senate